There are streets in this country that were old before America even had a name. Walk down them and you feel something. Something heavy. Something watching. Most people drive past these towns without a second glance. Guys, that is the biggest mistake you could ever make. Because hidden inside these ancient streets are secrets that rewrote American history. Stories of survival, betrayal, and power that nobody taught you in school. Trust me, the oldest towns in America are not just old buildings and pretty postcards. They are crime scenes, battlegrounds, and buried truths all rolled into one. Some of these places watched empires rise and collapse before the revolution even happened. And honestly, what went down in these streets would make your jaw hit the floor. We are about to take a road trip, but not the kind you've ever seen before. This is a journey through the darkest, most shocking corners of America's oldest towns. Every stop on this trip has a story that most historians quietly leave out. You're about to see this country completely differently by the time we're done. If you want the hidden truths behind America's oldest towns, subscribe to History Lab right now. Because what you're about to hear is the real American story, and it's wild. Hit that bell so you never miss a drop of history this powerful again. All right, first stop, and it's one that changes everything. St. Augustine, Florida. Founded in 1565 by Spanish explorer Pedro Menéndez de Avilés. That's 55 years before the Pilgrims even touched Plymouth Rock. Guys, most Americans have no idea their country's oldest city speaks Spanish in its bones. St. Augustine wasn't just a settlement, it was a military fortress built on stolen land. The Spanish wiped out a French colony nearby just to claim this stretch of Florida coast. No one talks about this, but that massacre set the tone for everything that followed. The town survived British attacks, pirate raids, and multiple changes of ownership. It changed hands between Spain, Britain, and the United States over 250 years. Honestly, St. Augustine has seen more chaos than most countries ever experience in their entire history. And here's where it gets really disturbing. When Spain controlled St. Augustine, they offered freedom to any enslaved person who escaped from British colonies. Thousands of people risked their lives, running through swamps, hunted by dogs, just to reach this town.
Fort Mose, built just outside St. Augustine, became the first legally free black settlement in North America. Think about that for a second. This forgotten town was America's first free black community. That story was buried for over 200 years before historians finally dragged it back into the light. Next stop, Santa Fe, New Mexico, founded in 1610. It is the oldest capital city in the entire United States, and it has seen absolute devastation. In 1680, the Pueblo people launched one of the most successful indigenous revolts in American history. They drove the Spanish completely out of Santa Fe. Every single soldier, every settler, gone. For 12 years, the Pueblo people reclaimed their land and their freedom. Wait, this next part shocked even historians. When the Spanish finally returned in 1692, they did not come back with just soldiers. They came back with a completely different strategy: negotiation, compromise, and promises they barely intended to keep. The power struggle that shaped Santa Fe shaped the entire southwestern America for centuries. Every modern border dispute, every land rights argument in that region, it traces back to those brutal years. And the Pueblo people? Their descendants still live there today, holding on to culture that survived everything. Now, let us head into Plymouth, Massachusetts, founded in 1620. You know the story they taught you in school: pilgrims, turkey, friendship with the Wampanoag people. But the real story of Plymouth is nothing like that Thanksgiving myth you grew up believing. Within 50 years of the Pilgrims' landing, they were at war with the very people who saved them. King Philip's War, fought from 1675 to 1678, was one of the bloodiest conflicts in American history per capita. Entire towns burned to the ground, on both sides. I'm telling you, proportionally, this war killed more people than the Civil War ever did. The Wampanoag leader Metacom, the colonists called him King Philip, fought back with everything he had. His head was displayed on a pike in Plymouth for 25 years after his death. 25 years, guys, right in the center of the town that preached about God and freedom. But the truth about America's oldest towns is far darker than you think. Let's head down to Jamestown, Virginia, founded in 1607. This is where the English experiment in America nearly died before it even started. The winter of 1609 to 1610 is called the Starving Time, and the name doesn't do it justice. Of the 500 colonists who entered that winter, only 60 stumbled out alive. Archaeologists found evidence of cannibalism inside the fort, and that evidence is completely real. Survivors wrote about it in their journals, trembling as they put the words on paper. Jamestown was saved, barely, by supply ships and by brutal exploitation of the land and its people. And here's where it gets really disturbing. Jamestown is also where American slavery took its first roots in 1619. 20 enslaved Africans were brought ashore, not as property yet, technically, but that distinction didn't last long. Within decades, Virginia had written the first slave codes into law, and a nightmare was officially born.
The town that Americans celebrate as the birthplace of democracy was simultaneously building a system of total human bondage. That contradiction lives in Jamestown's soil to this very day. Next stop, Annapolis, Maryland, founded in 1649. They call it the sailing capital of the United States, all pretty harbors and colonial brick. But Annapolis was one of the busiest slave trading ports on the entire East Coast. No one puts that on the tourism brochures, trust me. The beautiful State House where the Treaty of Paris was ratified in 1784 sits in a city built on that trade. Wait, this next part will genuinely stop you cold. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they all walked through Annapolis regularly. They dined in those elegant colonial homes while enslaved people worked in every room around them. The founding of American democracy and the expansion of American slavery happened in the same buildings, at the same tables. That is not a comfortable fact, but it is the real American story. Now I want to take you somewhere most road trips completely ignore. Cahokia, Illinois. This one is ancient even by American standards. Around the year 1000 AD, Cahokia was a city of 20,000 people, larger than London at that time. Built entirely by indigenous Americans, this city had pyramids, plazas, and a complex trade network. And then, around 1350 AD, it just collapsed. The people disappeared, the city fell silent, and historians still argue about exactly why. Climate change, political collapse, disease, nobody knows for certain what killed Cahokia. But the ghost of that great city sits quietly in Illinois, and almost nobody talks about it. Guys, America had a major metropolitan city hundreds of years before Europeans even knew this continent existed. That changes everything about how we talk about American history. And here is where it gets really disturbing. Cahokia and towns like it were systematically erased from the American national story. Explorers arrived, saw the mounds, and assumed ancient Europeans must have built them, refusing to believe Native Americans could. That racist assumption delayed serious archaeological research by over a century. The truth about these oldest places in America was buried, sometimes literally, under layers of denial and ignorance. Let us bring this road trip home now, and I want you to feel the weight of what we have covered. If this video made you see America differently, subscribe to History Lab right now. We dig up the stories that others leave buried, and there's so much more still to uncover.